So the leaders in healthcare of tomorrow start with the talent of today. That's what we're going to now be looking at in 45 minutes with our next round table. After that, we'll be taking a 15-minute break before looking at USA, inspiring the EU. But now, it's time to hand over to Elsy Boglioli to moderate our next roundtable.
Thank you. So we are apparently the last thing standing between you and the next break, which is always a tough spot. So we hope we'll manage to keep you interested. So today we want to talk about talent. And for this roundtable, we have Stéphane Boissel, a seasoned healthcare entrepreneur with experience both in the US and in Europe, and who recently raised a 50 million Series A for his gene therapy company. We have Arjun Goyal, who's the co-founder of Vida Ventures, you see on the screen here. A large US VC fund just closed a fund of more than 800 million, and who's actually an investor in Stéphane's company.
Not yet.
Ah. We have Charbel from Servier taking care of talent and leadership development, and who can give us the pharma partner perspective. And we have Angela Spatharou, who works with EIT Health, our partner here at HTID, on the talent topic, and who's also a healthcare executive at IBM. So just to kick off the discussion, maybe a few thoughts on talent. So the reason I'm moderating this roundtable is because I participated in a study ran by BCG and the French so the Boston Consulting Group and the French Public Investment Bank on the topic of biotech in Europe and in France, and the question of why don't we have more champions? And we discussed it yesterday in some of our roundtables. We keep coming back to this topic of how do we have more champions in Europe? And we identified a number of KPIs around, the depth of funding, around regulatory pathway, market fragmentation, and some of these topics were also addressed yesterday in President Macron's speech. So I think all of this actually has been pretty well identified for the past years. And so the question is, what's still holding us back? Philippe Lopez from Ipsen was saying, we need to be bold, we need to be ambitious, we need to make it happen. And one of the topics we found is what's holding us back is actually talent and the ability to execute, the ability to truly build great teams. And what we found is that this is particularly important in the health space, because you need a very broad variety of talents, and Stéphane can tell us in a minute about how he built his team. And this is one of the specific challenges, which probably the bar is higher than in some other industries. And we have kind of a chicken and egg problem, right? So we need champions to have this talent pool, but we need the talent pool to build champions. So with that, I will hand it over to Stéphane, and I'd like Stéphane and each one of you, please, to give us your perspective on this talent issue in the health tech space in Europe, and how you're solving it from your angle in what you're doing.
Thank you, Elsy. So maybe as a preliminary comment, we should say that it's not too difficult to find junior talents in Europe, let's say engineer, PhDs, young scientists, young physicians. But the problem or the issue is starting when you look at VP and above level, because here the talent pool is very limited. And I'm not talking about France only, I'm talking about Europe in general. And then the second comment I would like to make is that the pandemic has had one benefit when it comes to recruiting, is that we realize that we can work remotely, probably as efficiently, even at the C-level. And this is something which was not granted before. So in our case, for example, when we were building the team, we went to find a CTO in Boston, a CMO in Philadelphia, and a head of non-clinical development in San Francisco. Those 3 persons are members of a 7-person C-level suite, and it works perfectly well. And so then what you have to think about when you do that is that you cannot be cheap. You cannot pay or local prices, because that won't fly. So when you go on headhunt for people, you have to be very clear from the beginning that you will pay them as if they were to work for their local firm, around the corner. And that is a change in the way we used to work previously, based on my own experience. And because we were trying to recruit people first, we were trying to relocate those people in Europe, and then we were trying to pay them our kind of price. Okay, and that really doesn't work. Okay, and so that's what the main consideration, or the first consideration you need to have. And then the second consideration is that, but this is more specific to a small company like mine, and probably this is not the case for your company, but it's very difficult when you are in Series A or even more before to recruit, experience, talent with a proven track record, a star, established star. So what you have to look for, this is what we did, is to look for stars in the making. So not number one, but number two. And I will give you an illustration of that. Our CMO, Dan Cheng, he was number two in the medical department at Spark, and he was the one, doing the work for the development and launch of Lux Turner. And he was not a star, he was a star in the making, and we are turning him into a star.
Thanks, Stéphane. Very interesting also to hear about the diversity of locations. Arjun, maybe you can share your investor perspective?
Certainly, Elsy. So what I would say is that the challenges that Stéphane has outlined here in Europe, these are challenges that we're facing in the US. So there is a lack of talent or a paucity of talent. So many companies have been formed over the last several years. Hundreds of companies in the US focused on drug development, and so the rubric that we use is the rubric that Stéphane outlined. Which is to look for the up and coming stars, shall we say, in the US and get them involved in our companies. We do recycle talent within our own ecosystem at Vida, and that's common, amongst many US VCs. I think in the context of Europe, Vida has, 3 portfolio companies, here in Europe, one in Amsterdam, one in Nice, and one in the UK. What we found is that, retaining executives from the US, European executives from the US, that a 10, 15-year career, have made, their name, families they want to raise back in Europe. That's a rich, source of talent, a rich source of certainly VP and above level, talent that we can leverage. Beyond that, we've encouraged our European companies to think about, having a foothold in the US so they can access US capital markets, both late stage private and public. And to aspire to be the next Argenx. Argenx is a great example of a European company that's a world leader in immunology. There's no reason why there can't be many more of those type of companies that have their birthplace here in Europe and have their predominant footprint in Europe. And so that's what we're trying to do, with this transatlantic model of R&D in Europe and late stage development and sometimes corporate in the US to access capital markets, and then to look at European executives who've tasted the biotech bug, have done well in US biotech, understand the pace, the urgency, have the networks for capital that can come in handy for the European companies. I would also say that European investors, are pretty savvy now. They have very strong networks to crossover groups in the US. They've had, multiple successes with their companies listing on the US and competing with the very best in the US. So I do think that there is an increasing sophistication that we've certainly found amongst the investor network and as they think about how they scale their own companies here in Europe.
Thanks. Pharma perspective?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I'm listening to a lot of challenges let's take it the other way. I think we missed something in Europe in the last 5 years. We didn't take care of young generation to make them become stars. Because today, what's rare, it's already expensive. And what's expensive naturally becomes a star. So this is where we're facing this in the market of health tech and biotech is these people are known. They have a highly track record. So the name is everywhere. But if you look at the other side of this is if they're achieving, it's because they have talent working with them to enable them to achieve. So I think what we try to focus on today, and we have offices in Boston where we have also a lot of difficulties to bring talent, even if we're putting the money on the table, because there's very few people known in the area and they rotate in the companies. And to see them every 2 years changing company. Where's, the confidentiality of the innovation? And this is where we need to think about it this way is, what I'm trying to look at it is, if we think of the talent as young generation, I wouldn't say 20, 30, I would say 40s. These people has already a scientist track record. Why don't we just focus on those and bet on them? Because we're talking about what are the stars in the companies, what are the bets. I think today you invest. We have a lot of money that we put on the table to bring innovation to the health tech. Are we bringing money to bring innovation in the education of these people? Do we have enough environment? Is it ready for us to just adapt this? So what we're doing in Servier today is we're working with these guys, trying to develop them in a way that will become VPs or directors. Because the thing is, when you have the technology, if you want to become a leader in a company, you focus on the leadership. You have scientists, you need to open your mind a bit and don't stay scientists. Because when sometimes you listen to scientists talk about the biotech is, they only talk sciences. If you want to inspire people, and this is what you're looking for at investors, is you want someone, whenever they bring a topic on the table, you got people following them, making it happen. So what we look at it is, let's think of young generation, put money on the table to develop these people, and make sure that even the stars that you hire stay loyal to you. And this is the biggest topic that we're facing today is how we retain even the star that we are hiring. This is the biggest bet that we're having today. We can attract. You put money on the table, you attract people. But then you have someone else putting more money on the table. They will attract them. How we do to keep them loyal to our company if we give them a future, a vision, more development, and more high-level C-suite. So this is the thing is, I think European, we had this conversation the last time, is we're looking at it always as a challenge. I look at it as an opportunity to make things happen in the next 2 or 3 years. But we need to start today. I think we're already late on it.
I'd love to come back to that topic and also get your perspective, Stéphane and Arjun, on the balance between stars and bets, and maybe the difference in Europe versus in the US, and how you build your team in a little bit more detail in terms of which functions. But maybe before we get to that, Angela, could you share a few elements about your work with EIT and more broadly your thinking on the talent topic in health tech?
Yes, thank you very much, Elsy. So as you said earlier, I'm joining in a dual role, effectively. On the one hand, representing the tech sector because I lead IBM's healthcare and life sciences team for EMEA for the GBS function. But at the same time, as a board member of EIT Health. And EIT Health is the EU's appointed agency, let's say, tasked with promoting innovation and technology in healthcare over the last few years. So EIT Health has a very big mission on that. So a couple of years ago, we did a big piece of work looking at the impact specifically of artificial intelligence at that point on healthcare and on healthcare professionals. And one of the things we saw was that there is a huge gap in the skills and capabilities we need across healthcare, which for me translates then into health tech and medtech and other sectors that some of these professionals might go into. Which translates, for example, to, according to the WHO, needing something like 18 million additional professionals, healthcare professionals across Europe by 2030, but with big gaps in some of the professionals. So, for example, in the nursing profession, we have a gap of close to 40% in that same period. So there is a big gap on the one hand, and on the other hand, an increasing need to attract and retain the right talent. So what EIT Health is doing in the last year, we put together the Work in Health Foundation, and the aim there is to specifically, first of all, increase the visibility and reputation of the healthcare and health tech sector for young people who are either studying right now or coming through studies into the job market. We have seen in many reports that when they look at which professions to choose, healthcare is actually not in many cases in their top 10 of the things they would consider. And we want to change that. So the first effort is to improve the health sector image and support the attractiveness of careers and explain to people the attractiveness of careers they can have in the health tech sector across Europe. The second part is a recruiting part. EIT Health has a network of close to 600 health techs and other health-related organizations, and at the same time supports the training of thousands of young people, young professionals. So bringing the two together into a unique marketplace and helping health tech organizations choose and attract the best skills is the second part of what EIT Health is trying to do. And the third part is, of course, training and retaining. We want these people to see their career in healthcare and health tech and the health tech sector as an ongoing journey, not something they will come into and come out, but something that it will help them continue improving their career prospects, continue giving them something very exciting to do through ongoing skilling, upskilling, reskilling. And EIT Health is taking on the task to provide these services and capabilities for the sector across Europe. And if you go into the next slide that we have there, it's just an example of the different types of organizations that we already have. We have the Council of European Bioregions, which is a network of clusters and biocommunities across Europe already signing up to support and make these connections. We have the Biomedical Alliance in Europe, which is an initiative of leading European medical societies, bringing together close to 400,000 researchers and health professionals. And then organizations like AI for Health, Cap Digital, and many others, effectively being part of that journey and trying to create a unique space where health tech, academia, industry, and young professionals coming into the workspace are coming together to make sure we have and retain the right talent. I'll just pause here with this brief introduction, and hopefully we can come back with more questions.
Thank you very much. Coming back to one of the topics you mentioned and this discussion of betting on young talents, Arjun, first I'd like to have your U.S. perspective. My experience working with European biotechs is that there are a number of funds when you go after specifically U.S. funds, but even top European funds, who absolutely want to see a few stars in the team. They want to see experienced people. They want to see, if we're blunt, people who have already helped them make money with previous ventures. So, the question is, how many of these people do you need in a team, and how important is it? And of course, I'd like to hear both Stéphane and Arjun on this topic.
Elsy, it's a good question. It's something we do think about a lot. The way I would frame it, there's really, two things that I'm seeing. So yes, venture investors like to, bet on the jockey. We say bet on the jockey or bet on the horse. We bet on the jockey. And we're betting on, people who've been there and done it. The odds of, of success in this industry are so low, whether it's, successful product development or even, a strong M&A, that people who've tasted success, who know how to create a winning culture, can bring a team along with them. That's always garnered a premium here in the US. What I would say though, to just overlay that with, as we construct our teams, we don't want a team that that culturally has too many chiefs and not enough Indians. That's to say, we don't want people who, are there just figureheads and are not really, driving success, driving the work. Frankly, that doesn't serve anyone, do anyone any good. And so as we think of constructing these teams, you'll always find that, at least on the technical side, we'll have one or two, proven drug developers, people who, at least, aspirationally taken a compound all the way to approval. And then we can take look to take a bet on emerging entrepreneurial talent on the corporate side, BD side, finance side. So that's the the recipe that we've taken at Vida. Vida as a fund, from the outset, was really focused on building a name, backing first-time CEOs. And I think about a third of our companies, if you go through our portfolio of about 32, 33 companies, you'll find that roughly 10, 11 of them have first-time CEOs. And we then look to pair those first-time CEOs, as I mentioned, with proven R&D talent, but also a very strong, chairman or chairwoman. For the example of one of our European companies, Neogene, Carsten Linnemann, who's the co-founder and CEO of Neogene, is in his late 30s. He was a scientist at the Netherlands Cancer Institute. He's working with Frans Humer, former CEO of Roche, who's the chair of Neogene. We found that formula, if you like, works very well, not just here in Europe, but also in the US. And I would just take a step back and say that, what I've noticed in the US is that there are emerging areas like AI-enabled drug discovery, which is, or even AI-enabled, gene therapy, where we're seeing younger and younger founder CEOs, particularly from MIT in Boston. And as tech funds get into biotech, they're backing them, and some of those people have been quite successful. Chris Gibson from Recursion Pharma, which is now a $5-6 billion company, is in his I think he's in his late 30s now. It's a good story. So I think you're going to see more and more of these first-time CEOs, certainly in Europe, certainly in the US rather, who've actually tasted success because the structure around them has been optimized so they can tap into experience sets, and they're really working in these new emerging areas of science where they can take a bet.
Thanks, Stéphane.
Yeah, so maybe I misspoke, but we are not taking bet on the expertise or experience of people. We are taking a bet because we are trying to turn expert in a very technical field into a C-level executive. And that, until they are there, you just don't know, okay? So the way we are approaching it is that we are spending a lot of time, training, educating them, exposing them to the board, training on pitch to investors, how to say things, how not to say things, and so on and so forth. And then very rapidly you realize who is going to make it and who is not going to make it. So after that, you sometimes have to make tough decisions, but you have to make that decision very early on. Okay.
Thank you.
If I may, just one comment to what you said earlier, if I may. I think for us the challenge is not too much to retain people. Probably less so than in pharma, because we are permanently, we being the biotech environment, permanently on the move. And as long as your, trajectory is upwards, and as long as you give, good incentives to people, they don't have a lot of reason to leave, especially in Europe, because you have less competition than, let's say, in Boston, So I think we are coming from a slightly different place. It's harder for us to recruit probably than for you, but it's harder for you to retain than for us.
Yeah, I'd like to answer this one because it's quite interesting because maybe today you don't have difficulties to retain. But I think that if you don't think of it today, and this is what I'm trying to say, is you're going to keep moving, but on the move, you're going to have a lot, as Arjun said, a lot of big, small companies coming in with new CEOs, with a new innovative idea that will try to capture your stars. And you develop these people because you said that we're spending time, we're spending training, we're spending a lot of time with them, exposing them. And what I'm trying to say is, as a biotech, don't miss it today because we miss it in pharma to move people to go to biotech 3 or 5 years ago. If we don't do this move in the biotech area, I think we're going to be sitting here in 3 years saying, well, we need something for something else. And this is where I'm saying it because as an HR, you always think of the future of how you do the future with your people. The thing that we're facing today is we have a lot of ideas, we have money, we have innovations, but we need the people who enable us to do this. The first step, as Arjun was saying, is we need to bring the idea and get the investment. This is where we need the stars. And these people are just comfort, the investors saying, well, we're going to put the money on the table because they have R&D track record, they know what they're doing, we have the insurance that they go there. But then at the end of the day, you said, we're going to have scientists, we're going to have people who can develop behind. And this is where Big Pharma can help biotech because we have these scientists. We can just develop them in a way to support the biotech, area where we can move them quicker. And we talked the last time, we have, in Europe, we have a lot of areas where we have a lot of technical skills that are underused. If you look at aviation, you look at some industry, and these people we can in a way, quickly move them to some areas where we can use them in health tech area. And this is what I'm trying to say. Let's think, 2-3 years away, saying, well, now it's good, but pharma was good 3, 4, 5 years ago, And this is what I'm going to say in this one.
If I may, and I think also it's what Stéphane said around, we may have less trouble retaining the people because of our current ecosystem, which is not entirely as rich as we would like it to be in Europe. In my previous job, we used to say with people in the US, specifically in the Boston area, they go down to buy a hot dog for lunch and they have 3 job offers, and they're all great job offers, by the way. So of course they're happy to move on to something else because also salaries increase from company to company, and so if you're in a very, very dynamic system like the Bay or like Boston, it's easy to find your next gig, and unless you're moving fast and you're really on an exponential trajectory, I would say your people are at risk. So I do agree that today, actually, in Europe, maybe it's kind of a blessed few years when the ecosystem is really growing, but we don't have the amount of job offers that we have in other markets, of course. Angela, do you see something different in the tech space already in health tech? Because I know you worked also on the topic of AI in health, and is there already maybe a deeper talent pool thanks to the kind of permeability between the tech ecosystem and the health tech, or is there also a talent shortage in this health tech sector as much as in the biotech? Because I think we're talking a lot about biotech, but maybe things are a little bit different on the health tech side.
Thank you. There is definitely a very big gap in the health tech sector as well. And I think one of the things that make it a little bit worse is that the people the health tech sector tends to prize are people who would have had experience also working side by side with health and care delivery organizations and adapting and improving products as they go along. So there's definitely an element of, if ultimately the customer for a lot of these products is the healthcare system, which tends to be a public sector system in many parts of Europe, people who have had this experience and this permeability, as you said, of working across environments are pretty highly prized. So one of the things we see is the other way around, is looking at people from within the healthcare sector that might have the kind of interests and capabilities and skills, or who could be upskilled to develop into, let's say, more hybrid roles and over time transition both to the industry and the health tech sector. So we see a lot of fungibility and a lot of movement in that way. And interestingly, when we did the work on artificial intelligence, a lot of the people on our network, a lot of the young professionals, I'm talking here people sort of in their mid-30s at this point with the relevant expertise and so forth, quite often had this track record of working across sectors, having spent a period working with, let's say, a big academic medical center in a big innovative project, and then transitioning to the health tech sector, doing something else, and then going back. So a lot of fungibility and people working across in different clusters of innovation across Europe, whether it is, Cambridge in the UK, whether it's the Barcelona cluster in Spain or similar areas.
Thank you. So talent gap on both sides. So back to how we can contribute to work on this and fill this gap. Stéphane, you mentioned, keeping the people where they are and also paying them at the local standard. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you went about this? From working with European companies, sometimes the board is not thrilled to have very diverse salary ranges within a company. Sometimes the investors aren't thrilled to give out a lot of equity for some execs who used to have very generous equity packages in their previous jobs. Of course, equity is something that is the privilege of biotech companies and is kind of today's currency, and a lot of execs are in it for the upside, not only for the base pay. So did you find that difficult, and do you see an evolution in the maybe 5-10 past years in Europe, and also building on your US experience and how it was when you were working at Sangamo?
No, I think it has really changed over the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years. And the board and investors are much more willing now to go for, again, remote working environment, high salaries and so on and so forth. And if your board is against that move or is going against that current, maybe you should change your board, okay? Because this is the way the world is working now, okay? And then when it comes to finding the right people and making sure that they will work according to your culture, it's becoming business as usual now. You find more and more people to work remotely, and you find more and more board members or investors ready to pay the right price for the right person anywhere in the world. And then as a manager also you have to accept that sometimes you will have person with a better pay package than you, which is my case. For example, my CMO is at least when it comes to salary, has a better salary than mine, but that's life, and if I'm not very happy, then I move back to the US and I take what I used to have as a US salary.
So what made you want to come back to Europe? Because I think that's also a key topic, right? How do we bring back some of our European talents to take care of our European science and companies?
Well, for me it was COVID, so I'm not a good example.
Well, it could be a good lever, actually, because we do see that some talents are willing to come back to be closer to their families now. So maybe it's also a blessed period of time where we can bring back some talent.
But, well, this is where the role of the investors, I think, will be important, because you have to use your network, you have to use a convincing argument to go and look for these people. So I'm sure you will find plenty of European origin people based in the US willing to come back to Europe for the right opportunity. You just have to find those people, And so I was able to find, again, half of my C-suite in the US. I'm sure you can find plenty of CEOs, maybe first-time CEOs, but you have anyway, you have 10 biotech companies started every week or so. So you need 10 new CEOs every week. So you need to go and find them somewhere.
Well, just a slight comment on this one. I'm talking under the control of Arjun, who's in the US. And as you are saying, people in the US are willing to take more risk when they just do the move, when they change. When you come back to Europe, and we're facing this every day, is whenever you offer something to someone in Europe, it'll take a longer time to convince them to make this shift and the change, even if you're paying more money. And this is where somewhere in Europe we have in this ecosystem difficulties to bring young CEOs to be stars, because they want to check it before. And this is where I'm not sure that we're able to change them, but I think the ecosystem will need to just bring all the trust and security for them just to bring them in there. I think we're facing it every day now, in European market.
Yeah, and one last consideration is... Excuse me? Oh, one last... Oh, you wanted to say something, sorry.
No, please, Stéphane, go ahead, and then I'll have the comment.
The thing that has yet to change totally compared to the US is the magnitude of the funding, because it's easier to attract even, again, a star in the making, ask him to come back or ask her to come back if that person knows that she will have a lot of money to play with, if you excuse my French. Okay.
I would share just two vignettes, that encapsulate sort of real-world example to encapsulate the last 5 minutes. So we have a company in Nice, Inisco, which is a lentiviral gene therapy company. The CSO of that company is a French scientist who had tremendous success in the US with a company called Asclepius Bio, which is a gene therapy company that Bayer bought. He's originally from the south of France, spent a decade in North Carolina. Tasted success with Asclepius Bio, and then moved his family back to to the south of France. It's a beautiful place, as you guys know, and is now the CSO of Inisco. One of the advantages of that is that he kind of imbues the entrepreneurial vigor, the urgency, the sense of urgency, the sense of pace that you find in the US now in this small French company. And we've done that with Neogene, we've done that with Centessa as well. Having said that, the rounds that we are doing, in the US, for companies that we're putting together, just to Stéphane's point, we're raising $100, $150, $200 million. We're recruiting, scientists and executives who actually come from Europe, who've spent a couple of years in pharma or biotech in the US, and we're recruiting them into these companies in Boston, really in Boston. They have the choice to go back to Europe, and many of them, put their professional ambitions above, potentially family or personal ambitions, because they want to have that 5-year runway to see if they can make it really big in a company. And so I think, the way to address that is, putting together big rounds, really here in Europe, and I'm actually speaking from Berlin, but putting big rounds here in Europe that can match US rounds with transatlantic syndicates. And I think if you can do that, then you're going to attract, really world-class talent.
Yeah, I think we all agree on that one. And I think, again, it's also a bit of a chicken and egg. I remember, Arjun, when we were talking about this in our first conversations, you mentioned that sometimes European teams are not ambitious enough and they are shy to ask for these mega rounds. And I think that is something, in the past year, we've actually seen a couple of very impressive Series A's. And that shows that things are changing. But I think there's also some amount of ambition and being very bold and asking for an amount which probably a few years ago you never thought you could get for series, for even a seed. Even the seed rounds now are kind of through the roof, and I think this is something where we probably need to help our European talent pool really be ambitious, and of course having the right team around the table helps to be ambitious. You were going to comment.
Yeah, I think that you're right with this one, because I think, have we informed the ecosystem this is really changing? I think the people who are in it know it, but the people who are around, as you mentioned, is when they know that they can raise all these funds, they play with this money and get things done. And I think the ecosystem of health tech didn't communicate enough on the opportunities that we have in there for the people coming from pharma or even young generation. If you go to high school, university, or whatever, I'm not sure that if you ask them where they want to go tomorrow, that you will mention health tech as an area where you want to drive them, I think this is where we need to start a way.
Yeah, and I think it's actually interesting what you mentioned about pharma, right? I think if you look at the US market, you have almost every biotech executive has gone back and forth between pharma and biotech. And it's very fluid. If you look at Europe, a lot of people make their entire careers in big pharma. And if they move from big pharma to big pharma, or their entire career in biotech. And I think, obviously, specifically in technical functions, in CMC, in manufacturing, in things where, of course, it's an advantage to have been in a company which actually has products on the market. And as you said, Arjun, having registered products and taken products to patients, that is probably something that we can work on as we create a safer ecosystem in biotech and as we raise more money. And as said Stéphane, as executives have more money to play with, it might be perceived as less risky. But I think, I don't know what you guys think today, both being each on one side, but I think it's still perceived as a risky move. And a lot of big pharma executives in Europe hesitate before making that move. Yeah, we can open up for questions. We have a few more minutes. So thank you very much to everyone. I think just maybe one last thought. Talent is probably the key bottleneck and the enabler to a lot of additional topics. We talked about funding, for example, and I think, as you said, Arjun, having the right talent is also helpful to get the right level of funding. And I was talking earlier to Philippe Lopez, the head of business development at Ipsen, and he was also saying that in talking to his friend at Atlas Ventures, they also mentioned that today, for them, the biggest bottleneck isn't finding great science, it's actually building the great team around the science. So let's hope we can solve this. And thank you very much to all of you, and thank you to Arjun and Angela on video.